You ever been there? You're scrolling through your feed, or maybe you're watching some travel show, and you see something completely foreign, a custom, a food, a way of life, and before you can even think, this one little thought just pops right into your head. Yeah, that one. That immediate, almost gut reaction. Maybe you hear someone else say it, or you catch yourself thinking it. It's a snap judgment that feels like it comes out of nowhere. But where does it come from? So, is that thought a sign that you're a bad person? Intentionally closed-minded? Or is something else going on? Something more predictable? Kind of like a glitch in the system when our brains hit an unknown error. All right, let's dive into this. Well, it turns out this mental habit has a name. And according to the work of theorist RJ Starr, understanding it shows us that it's often not some personal flaw, but more like a built-in feature of how our minds try to be efficient. It's called parochial attribution. Okay, let's break that down. Parochial just means local or limited in scope. Attribution is about how we explain things. So basically, we take our own little world, our own backyard, and we accidentally treat its rules as the rules for the entire planet. It's like we're judging the whole world by looking through a keyhole, but we think we're looking through a giant window. To get why this happens, we have to talk about something called schemas. Think of schemas as your brain's internal filing cabinet. Every single experience you've ever had, every book you've read, every conversation, every meal, it all creates these little mental files. They're shortcuts that let you navigate the world super fast without having to figure everything out from scratch every single second. But here's the catch. When you run into something totally new, something you have absolutely no mental file for, your brain doesn't just stop and go, data not found. Nope. It kind of panics and just grabs the closest file it can find. And way too often, the file right next to difference is labeled wrong, or broken, or less than. So difference gets misfiled as deficiency. And this really gets to the heart of the idea. It's not necessarily about being a bad person. It's a data problem. The person's brain is just running a program with incomplete information. As Starr puts it, they are, in that moment, cognitively unequipped. So that's the initial spark, the glitch. But how does one tiny, fleeting thought like, that's weird, morph into a deeply held belief? Let's trace how this thing can grow. It often escalates in this four-stage loop. It starts with that cognitive misattribution, the thought. Then you get a little emotional jolt from it. Maybe you feel a little superior or just comforted by your own normalcy. That feeling reinforces your identity. I'm a normal person, unlike them. And finally, your brain cements this whole chain into your worldview as a simple fact about how things are. And this is why it gets so hard to change. What started as just a tiny gap in your mental filing cabinet can become a huge, load-bearing wall in the very structure of how you see the world. Trying to challenge it doesn't feel like learning something new anymore. It feels like someone is trying to knock your whole house down. Okay, but not all of these snap judgments are created equal. To really get it, it helps to break parochial attribution down into 3 different flavors. So first, you have absence of schema. This is a pure input problem. You genuinely just don't have the mental file. You've never been exposed to the information. The second, presence without selection, is trickier. You actually have the file, you know better, but for some reason, maybe social pressure or discomfort, you just don't open it. And the third, deliberate override, well, that's an agency problem. You have the file, you know it's there, but you choose to ignore it and make the negative judgment anyway. All right, so if having a narrow mental map is the problem, what's the solution? How do we actually fight this default setting in our own heads and build a better system? Now, here is a really critical distinction. We tend to think more education is the fix, but it's not quite that simple. A lot of times, formal education is just a stand-in, a proxy. The real driver of change isn't the diploma on the wall, it's direct, meaningful exposure to difference. So how do you get that kind of exposure? Well, it's not just about being near people who are different. Sometimes that can even make stereotypes worse. It's about engagement that forces you to understand. It's immersive travel or working in a new environment. It's deep reading of history or literature from a totally different point of view. The key here is participation, not just proximity. And what's the result of all this? What's the payoff? People who have this wider range of mental files, they don't jump to conclusions so fast. Their first reaction isn't judgment. It's usually curiosity. They hold that first thought kind of lightly, provisionally, as just one possibility among many, not as the final answer. And that's really the big takeaway here. The point of expanding your mental map isn't about collecting a bunch of facts so you can prove you're right and other people are wrong. It's about building a richer, more flexible mind. It's about having more ways of seeing the world, which is a much, much more powerful skill. So, I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What ideas, what cultures, what kinds of people are living right at the very edge of your own mental map? And what kind of engagement could you seek out? Not just to see them, but to actually start to understand.